Human trafficking can be difficult to define because synonyms for human trafficking include terms like modern-day slavery and trafficking in persons. Additionally, there are different forms of trafficking, including debt bondage, forced labor, and commercialized sex trafficking. All of this can be overwhelming, and that is why in this section, we are going to look at the two most widely recognized and accepted definitions of human trafficking used throughout the world over the past 20 years. The first definition we will look at is in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, commonly referred to as the TVPA. This act was signed into U.S. law in the year 2000 and has been reauthorized several times, keeping the U.S. definition of human trafficking the same for more than 20 years. Through several versions and updates, the TVPA definition of human trafficking has remained fairly consistent by dividing human trafficking into two categories: labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Let us go over the TVPA definition in detail together. From Section 103, subsection 8, the first definition is sex trafficking. Like all human trafficking, sex trafficking is a commercial act. The TVPA refers to commercial sex acts as any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. This can be in exchange of money, a good, or services. The TVPA also details the three means in which someone can be trafficked: force, fraud, or coercion. Force and fraud are pretty straightforward, but coercion can be tricky. The TVPA defines coercion as threats of physical harm, scheming or planning that would result in the physical restraint of a person or the abuse or threatened abuse of the legal process. Lastly, the TVPA says anyone under the age of 18 engaging in commercial sex is automatically a victim of sex trafficking without having to establish that force, fraud, or coercion were used. When we look at labor trafficking, it is important to remember that the purpose is not commercializing a sex act. Instead, the purpose is to benefit from a person's labor. Additionally, this is where the TVPA details the actions of trafficking, which include recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, and obtaining a person. Taken together, the TVPA's definition of human trafficking relies on actions, means, and purpose. This is known as the AMP model. This acronym will make it easier for you to define and identify human trafficking. The next human trafficking definition comes from the Palermo Protocol and is widely accepted internationally. Ratified by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2000, its official title is the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children. This non-binding resolution acts as a recommendation for 193 UN member states to improve international cooperation to catch criminals and assist victims. Article 3 has notable similarities to the TVPA definition. First, in Section A, the actions of trafficking are defined as recruitment, transportation, harboring, and receipt of a person. The Palermo Protocol's means are identical to the TVPA: force, fraud, and coercion. The Palermo Protocol also includes deception and abduction as means of trafficking. These terms are likely encompassed in the TVPA as means of force and coercion. Finally, while the Palermo Protocol definition does not explicitly state purpose, it instead uses the word exploitation. This is appropriate because all human trafficking involves exploiting an individual. The forms of exploitation include servitude, the removal of organs, and commercial sex acts, which are defined as prostitution and forced labor. While Section A provides the bulk of the definition, Sections B and C are important as well, because Section B explicitly states that the victim being complicit in any acts before becoming trafficked are not considered a mitigating factor in being considered a victim. For example, if someone agreed to be smuggled across the border and upon entering the country found out they were going to be trafficked, they are still considered just as much a victim as someone who was kidnapped prior to being trafficked. Simply put, it does not matter how someone became a victim. What matters is that they meet the conditions for being a victim. In Section C, the Palermo Protocol defines all exploited children as human trafficking victims, regardless of establishing the means of how they are being trafficked. This is exactly what the TVPA stated about commercial sex and minors. Now that we have gone through both of these widely accepted definitions of human trafficking, you can see the similarities and overlaps in how human trafficking is defined around the world.